welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Mackenzie and I used to work for Disney, but today I'm going to tell you guys about what I hated or why I hated working for Disney, which actually I can't say with a straight face because I loved working for Disney. I never really hated it. I could never even say I hated it, but there were some things I really didn't like. I won't say hate, but there were some things I didn't like about working for Disney that made it not so fun sometimes, and I wanted to share this with you guys because I feel like it's really good to know that before you get yourself into a job. Although like I honestly love my time working there, there's going to be some days where they're not as fun, and as much as I love to be positive here on this channel especially, I think there's some value in being realistic as well, so I wanted to share those with you guys today. Alright, first thing I did not like about working for Disney, or that's not that great, is that they are not a non-profit, which I think should be absolutely obvious to everyone by now, but let me explain. So Disney is in the business of making people happy, or it seems that way. So honestly, their ultimate goal in anything is to make a profit. This should not be a surprise to anyone. However, sometimes they will structure things or they'll do things because they want to make a profit. That's why their meal prices are expensive at their parks. That's why the park tickets are so expensive, and that's why it costs a lot of money when you're trying to buy merchandise and it's not the cheapest place to go. So if they could, if they wanted to, they could easily probably lower their prices, but they're not going to because ultimately they want to make a profit. That is their main goal. They're not a nonprofit. They want to make money, so that is their goal. And I know it seems like that's not their goal because all the shows make you happy and you can have a really fun time there, and they kind of advertise it like you're going to have the most amazing family trip ever. But even though they seem like they're all about their consumers or customers, really their goal is to make their goal is to make a profit. And that's not that strange because there's a lot of businesses out there where that's their goal. Like that's the whole point of a business, is to make money and to make a profit. So it shouldn't be that surprising, but I think sometimes it comes as a shock that that's Disney's main goal in everything they do, because they try so hard to promote like family time and having a good time and being happy, and they are really good at customer support. Like I got the most like hands-on customer support experience while working there. So that is true, but at the end of the day, they care more about making money. That's why if you go to a holiday party or like a Halloween party and it's during the hurricane season in Florida and it gets absolutely rained out and there's a lot of things you can't do, they will not refund you unless for whatever reason they can't do any sort of shows or parades or anything that entire night. As long as they're able to squeeze like one thing in, even if it's not the right show, if they're able to squeeze in like anything, they will not give you a refund. So they don't really give people refunds, but they do try hard to be good at customer service, so they'll find other ways to make up for that. But yeah, their goal is to make money. I've noticed that magical moments are kind of dying out and they're not as prominent as they used to be, which is kind of sad. But yeah, their goal is to make money. Another thing that's not great about working for Disney kind of ties into that first point about it being, you know, for business and them, you know, wanting to make money, is people that go there are rude, and they are ruthless sometimes, like awful. Like some of the stories I have, and I think I shared some of them in my crazy Disney stories or crazy Disney guest stories. I can't talk today, it's fine. I mentioned about how like rude people can be and how awful they can be. But honestly, the reason why they're so rude is because they have this idea in their head of what they want to do, and you really can't get everything done in a one trip. Like you're gonna have to sacrifice some stuff. Maybe they were waiting in line for a really long time and what they were waiting for like really didn't live up to their expectations, or they just spent 6 hours waiting for 3 rides or 1 princess. And so yeah, they're gonna be upset because they spent a lot of money trying to be here. And I talked to a lot of cast members about this when I was working there, that because Disney keeps upping the price of the experience of going to the parks, people are going to get more and more upset because it's going to take more and more for them to feel like they are satisfied with what the money that they're spending. Because back in the day, if you're spending like maybe like $50 on a park ticket, you can get a lot in and feel like you got your money's worth and feel satisfied. But if you're spending like $180 for one day, you expect like balloons and sparkles and just like magic everywhere, and you're going to expect a lot more because you are paying so much more than you used to. So that I think causes a huge problem, because people are going to get really upset when all of a sudden their trip is not as magical as they expected, or it's crowded, their food costs a lot of money, it wasn't that great. I mean, there are some places that are great, but all is to say, people are going to be rude. It doesn't excuse it because no one deserves to be treated rudely But it's going to happen, and it did happen a lot when I was working there. It happened a lot more when I was a character attendant because for whatever reason, guests like to take it out more on the character attendants than they do on the characters themselves. They're pretty nice to the characters, not so much to the attendants. But that will happen, and they'll be rude, and you will experience that pretty much in every single role that you're in when working there. So be prepared for that people are going to be rude when you are working there. This next one really does pertain to character performers more than any other role, just because of what the role demands. But there was a lot of body shaming when it came to being a performer. I've talked about this before in different videos. My character performer video, I talked about this, and it comes from both sides. It comes from both other performers and from the guests. They envision you to be this certain person, and they think that because you are performing that you are just a prop, you are not a person, and so they will treat you sometimes not the best, and they will just say things to you, and I don't know what's going on where they just think that they can get away with that and just say awful things to you, but for whatever reason they do. Like, I've had friends, luckily, thankfully, it never happened to me, but I've had friends where guests tell them, like, on set when they were meeting guests would tell them that, like, oh, like, you're chubbier than you should be, or they'll just tell them those things. And like, adults would tell them those things, not just kids who like don't know better, but like adults would tell them those things. I remember my friend was performing, and we both knew like a little bit of Spanish. Like, she knew probably more Spanish than I did, but then the mom was asking her son, like, oh, do you want a picture with her? And he said something about like gordita, which means, or gorda, which means fat. Like, oh no, I don't want to take a picture with her because she's fat. Like, really? Like, even if it's in a different language, like, just don't assume that she doesn't know what you're saying. Like, that's just not, in any language, in any circumstance, like, that's not okay, but it will happen, sadly, because there are people out there that just feel like they're entitled to saying that, and it just is awful, but it will happen. It even happened to me. I noticed it between other performers. They would talk about people behind their backs, and like sometimes it'd be in the opposite sense. Like, it wouldn't naturally just be like, oh, she's too like heavy. It would also sometimes be like, oh, like, who's a person wearing a size extra small costume today? Like, why are you wearing, like, you know, they would just be kind of like ruthless either way. It doesn't make any sense to me. It didn't back then, it doesn't now, but for whatever reason, people are insecure in the world and they feel the need to comment on other people's bodies, and it doesn't make any sense, but it will happen, sadly. So just prepare yourself for that. If you are interested in being a performer, just know that that could happen while you're working there, either from the guests or even sometimes fellow performers, just because, you know, people aren't always nice to each other, which is sad, but it's the world we live in today. This one might not seem that bad to most people. For me, it wasn't the most fun thing in the world. It just really depends on your circumstance. The hours are random and you don't get holidays off most of the time. So hours being random, it didn't really affect me because my boyfriend was back in Washington, my family was back in Washington, so all my friends, we all lived there. It's not like I needed a 9-to-5 job. It's not something I didn't need weekends off because I didn't really have anything to do, like, other than go to work. Like, I love my job, so it didn't really affect me that much, but that would be really hard if the people that you care about are working completely different times than you are. Like, I personally love working in the evenings. I feel like I could get a lot done in the day, so I worked in the evenings. I would work from like 5 to like midnight sometimes and then sleep in, and I love my schedule, but it could be hard because a lot of my friends, if we all have random schedules, it was really hard to find people to hang out with because not everyone's going to be off at the same time. Like, the last couple months I was working there, my roommate worked in the morning and I worked in the evening, so there would be days where I wouldn't see her at all, and that would be really lonely. Another thing that's hard too is, like, most of the time you won't get holidays off. So sometimes if you're naturally scheduled that day off, you could still get it off. But if you're scheduled to work on a holiday, like, you'll be scheduled to work different days of the week. So this year, if you work on Sundays, and Sunday was both Christmas and New Year's Eve, you didn't get either of those off. And so sometimes it doesn't really matter. Like, for me, like, my family was all back in a different state, and so for me it didn't really matter because I didn't have plans anyways, and so why not work? And I went to work and I got to work with Mickey Mouse on Christmas, and it was so much fun, but that was kind of hard. And if you're someone where your family's nearby and you won't be able to hang out with them because you have to work on those holidays, like, that could be a huge bummer. Take that into mind too, if that's something that you don't want to do. If you want to have a morning shift, you're not guaranteed a morning shift even when you pick your schedule. There's other people that get to pick before you based off seniority, so you aren't guaranteed really anything, and you'll have to work on the holidays most likely. So if that's something that's really important to you, I know for me in my new job now, like, I have a set 7 to 4 job, and then I have the weekends off. So I like having that consistency because it matches up with my roommates and it matches up with my boyfriend and my family. So if I want to go do things with them, I can plan trips knowing that I will have the same time off as them, and I really love that. But if you're somewhere where that doesn't matter too much, then it's fine. But I just thought it was worth mentioning because that could be something that could cause a conflict for you if you are looking into working for Disney. This next one's going to be very similar and the last one I mentioned, in the same tense of like days off or working or work days, but it's really hard to get days off in some roles. So I was only in 2 different roles, which is more than most people can say. Most people just do 1 role and that's their only role. I was lucky enough to do 2 different roles, and in my character attendant role, it was actually really easy for me to get days off. Not necessarily getting the days off, like they wouldn't just give me the days off if I asked them for it off. You have to put it in with your managers, and if I asked them for the day off, they wouldn't just like give it to me off. But luckily for me, when I was a character attendant, there was a lot of different character attendants, and the role was universal in the sense that you could work at any park, you could do any shift, even if you weren't like trained for it. There was only like maybe 2 different types of roles that you had to be specifically trained for, but the majority of the roles you could easily pick up or trade with someone. So my boyfriend's family, when I was in the character I was in the college program and I was a character attendant. There we go. I got it. And we wanted to go to the Bahamas. So I was able to request, I figured out what the maximum amount of days was that I could request or I could take off without basically getting fired. So that's what I did, was I was able to trade all those shifts away. I didn't really worry about, I think I tried putting in some of that time off, like requesting it off, but I obviously did not get that time off. So I had no problem giving away those shifts. I think there was one point where I was worried about having to call out, but then I didn't have to because someone picked it up. But as a character attendant, I had no problem like literally taking 12 days off, going to the Bahamas, and getting that time off. But as a performer, there's a lot less people that can do your job for you. So there's maybe 30 other people and they all have full schedules. It's not like they're just sitting around waiting to pick up shifts, whereas some of the character attendants were, they were just wanting extra shifts. You had to like trade shifts. It was a lot more difficult. And I knew girls, like I tried to get off time for my brother's wedding, and I didn't get it off, but then I ended up leaving the company before my brother's wedding, so I got to go. It worked out fine, but I had friends who were still working for the company and could not get time off for their own weddings. Like they wouldn't give them time off for their weddings, and then they go ask people like if they could trade with them, and like I would always help out when I could, but there's a lot of times where I had a full schedule and you're not allowed to pick up extra shifts if you have a full schedule because you'll get overtime and they don't want you to have overtime. It's very complicated. So there was a lot of girls I knew who couldn't get their own weddings off. They weren't even allowed to go to their own weddings because they couldn't get the time off. And so that was really difficult. And I know depending on the job, I don't know about different other jobs, like if it comes to like attractions or even PhotoPass. I'm assuming it would be very similar to that. I'm not sure. I think for PhotoPass and attractions it might be a little bit easier than performers, but it might not be as easy. I think PhotoPass would probably be very similar to character attendants because there's just as many as them. It was really difficult as a performer trying to get time off because there's very few people who could do your job, and those people that are doing your job, most of them were full-time. The only people that could pick up were part-time, and there wasn't a lot of them, and so it was a mess, and it was hard to get time off. So if that's something that's important to you, is being able to get time off easily, that's not something that you will really find depending on your job. So like I said, character attendant, there were ways around it, but overall just requesting through management to get time off, it was really, really hard. And the last thing I wasn't crazy about when working for Disney is the sense of earning things or hierarchy kind of started to fizzle away when I was working there, and I think it's even probably worse now. And what I mean with that is like there's no sense of earning anything, so, or even seniority. I mean, you have seniority when it comes to picking your shifts, but back in the day, the way it used to work is the people who were there longer got more opportunities when it came to performing. Like you got more roles and you got to do parades and shows. But then when I was there, it was kind of a free-for-all where there was absolutely no way to figure out how you would earn anything. So I came in, I had one face character and that was it, and I loved it. I didn't do parades and shows, I did meet and greets, and I absolutely loved it. I had a great time. But I think for some people it was kind of frustrating because I had friends who were there for like 7 years and they just had that one role and they didn't get to do parades and shows, they just did meet and greets. And that's a long time to be doing one job. And then I had friends who came in the same time as me and had 3 different roles, and then they got to do parades. And like, I had another friend who got 2 different roles and did 2 different parades as soon as she came in. So there was no sense of earning anything, and that was hard for me too, especially in trying to figure out how long I wanted to stay there. I think if there was more of a sense of earning things, or that if you stay there longer you get more opportunities, I would have definitely stayed there longer. I just didn't want to be that person that was there for 5 years, kind of gave up my life or my ideas of what my life wanted to be in Washington to be there for 5 years and not get any more opportunities. I didn't want to do that. I think that's pretty normal in any job. You want to see growth. You want to be able to know how you can grow, and how that opportunity will make you grow and give you more opportunities in the future, whether it's with different companies. That's pretty normal. And so in there, I didn't really see that. And that was really hard for me working there, because I feel like I didn't really have anything to motivate me. I didn't really have anything to work towards, and that was kind of challenging. So, I mean, I could have had more opportunities. I just don't know. I never stayed around long enough to figure it out. I had lots of friends that got more opportunities after I left, but that's the thing, you never know, and that's really hard in making that decision and figuring out when it's a good time for you to move on, because I didn't want to just be stuck there and not know if I was going to advance in any way. And I didn't see myself living in Florida. And yeah, it was a really hard decision, and that made it a little bit harder because I just didn't know what my future looked like at the company. And on the opposite end of that, there's no really sense of job security. It's not really there, because basically if you're a performer and you're a face performer or a lookalike performer, they basically tell you when you have to leave. You could get aged out or be told that you're too old at the age of 24. I had a friend that was, I'm 24 now, I had a friend that was 24, and she was all of a sudden told like, oh, you're too old and you can't do these characters anymore. And then I knew someone else who's now like 32 and she's still performing. So basically though, it's all in their favor and it's not really in yours. Whereas in any other job, your age does not matter at all. Like the way you look doesn't even matter, but for this job, it does. And so you don't have that sense of job security, whereas that's not necessarily true for other roles within the company and other jobs, and that made it really hard for me to decide when I need to leave. And it's hard for me too, even after I've left. Like, I always wonder like, oh, like if I stayed there longer, would I have gotten more opportunities? And I try not to like really like let myself think like that, because I had a wonderful time there and I knew when I left like that was the right time for me. But it is hard looking back and be like, oh, I wonder what it would have been like if I just stayed like a few more months. Maybe I would have gotten more opportunities, you know? So that is hard if you are looking into wanting to be a performer. That is something that you will really have to think about, is thinking about if you're a performer where you show your face, there will be a time where they will tell you like you can no longer have this job. And for me, that was something that I really wanted to decide for myself. I didn't want someone else to tell me that, so that's why I chose what I did to leave, because I wanted to be on my terms. So that's something you'll have to decide for yourself, but that is kind of a downside to the performing world. Anyways, I know I talk a lot about the positives about Disney and how much I love working for Disney, because it's true. I do love Disney. I loved working for them. I thought I had the most wonderful time. Like, yes, they're a corporation and there were some downsides to it, but overall, I loved my job. I loved what I got to do every single day. But I think sometimes if you just hear that and you want to have that sort of job and you want to be in that role, it could be misleading in some ways to think that you're going to have this amazing time and not hear both sides of the coin, if that makes sense. So I want to be realistic with you guys and talk to you guys about some of the stuff that I wasn't a huge fan of. Again, it didn't affect how much I loved working for the company. I left when I wasn't burnt out, and I'm really glad I did, because I still have really great memories of working there and I still love the company. But I just want to let you guys know some not so fun things that you probably should think about if you are interested in working for the company someday. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye! Very hard in some roles. It's like elephants. To sit on here of them. I can't talk today, it's fine.